Hey, New Orleans. Here I was this past weekend, enjoying my weekend, campaigning for re-election to the New Orleans City Council, staying in my lane, so to speak, when I was sent a video about a candidate for mayor who once again cannot get off his city council fixation.
The city council has staff. They have smart people who understand numbers. They understand the budget. But when there's politics at play, and when the administration tells you in January, hey y'all, we got a budget deficit that's on the way, but the council is more interested in playing politics and making things messy because we got an election coming up, then this is where we find ourselves, ladies and gentlemen.
It seems like Senator Duplessis is obsessed with gaslighting the people of the city of New Orleans into thinking that this would be a utopia, a city on a hill, so to speak, if the council would just get out of the way and let LaToya Cantrell govern the way she wants to govern. Now, what's troubling is two parts. The first is that he is obsessed with the council, but he's not running for council. He's running for mayor. And yet he never has any commentary on what the mayor is doing or not doing and what he would do different. The second issue is he is constantly spouting tremendous misinformation, throwing shade on your entire city council in an effort to not put the mayor's name in his mouth. Now, when it comes to the budget, I've actually got a special guest who's come back yet again to educate us on what's going on with the budget and how ridiculously wrong Senator Duplessis is on where the council's been on the budget and what our responsibilities are versus the mayor of the city of New Orleans when it comes to deficits. After my colleague's treatise on the complete misinformation spouting out of Senator Duplessis, I'm going to come back and comment on some other things that I think you might find pretty interesting. But take it, Joe.
Hey everybody, I'm Joe Giarrusso, Councilmember District A and Chair of the Budget Committee. I really wish I didn't have to be here to explain remedial budget and how it works in practice, but I guess that's what we're going to do instead of actually trying to find a solution to fixing the budget. To do this, I'm going to start at the very beginning, and I know some of these terms people know, but I just think it's really important that people understand what we're talking about because this is a language onto itself. And then I'll also tell you some things about how I felt or how it's worked in the past, all right? So first is, you're going to hear me talk about the Chief Administrative Officer, who I'll probably refer to the most of the time as CAO. The Chief Administrative Officer is defined in the city's Home Rule Charter, or the Charter, as essentially the number 2. We'll get back to that. There's also the Chief Financial Officer, who's in charge of finance and in charge of revenue, and that person is right below the Chief Administrative Officer. And then you'll hear me probably once, maybe twice, use the term by request. That means the administration, the mayor usually, asks a council member to carry a motion, an ordinance, or amendment that they would like and they agree to, and the council is then asked with passing this. All right, so there's really two main things I want to talk about in the budget process. And the first is how it all works. I'm going to do it two ways. I'm both going to talk to you about what it says in the charter, and I'm also going to tell you about practically having been in the chair, how it works. All right, so I'm going to point below because there's going to be some links in here. You've got some homework to do. And the first one is, it says directly in the charter, the person who prepares the annual operating and capital budget of the city is the CAO. Here's the link. Also, in a section right above that, it says the CAO is responsible for all the departments except for law and civil service. So that means right at the very beginning, just by reading the charter, we know that the CAO is responsible for preparing the budget. Well, what happens next? Okay, well, we could just say this is the way it's always been done, but guess what? The charter, once again, talks about how this is supposed to happen. The CAO actually starts at the beginning of August. They meet with the department heads. They talk with the department heads. Department heads and outside agencies give all sorts of feedback to the CAO. What typically happens, in fairness, is department heads ask for all these things there isn't enough money for, and the CAO cuts all of that back to something that is reasonable that works. In that process, I will typically start having a conversation with the CAO and maybe the CFO about what's going on. What direction are we in? How are we feeling? What are the things that are the mayor's priorities? What are the things that are the council priorities? What are the things that are untouchable? What are the things that are touchable? We start to begin having this conversation, but it really isn't until about the end of September or early October where things begin to crystallize. Now look, over the next basically month and a half, we have all these budget hearings inside chambers. You name the department, the agency, almost all of them come and appear before us. Now what you don't see is what happens behind the scenes. And that's where the CEO and I primarily are talking about how are the budget hearings going? What are we seeing? Are any new issues popping up? Are there any problems that are happening? And we make sure we're having that conversation because it's really important when we get to passing the budget, as we did on November 21, that nobody's blindsided. In that process, we talked about a whole bunch of things, including the school board settlement. We just thought that was something that was important to be added. And what typically happens is there is an amendment to the ordinances that are introduced in October to change certain things, and usually to add, sometimes subtract things that are in the budget, and we want to make sure that that is happening. So guess what? There's more in the charter too that talks about you can't overspend. Here it is again, here's a link. It literally says right in the charter, right here, that you cannot spend more than your revenues. Now, whoever drafted the charter is pretty smart because it says in another part of the charter, again linked below, that you can't introduce an amendment to overspend. So in other words, the mayor can't say, I want to fix the budget here, but then the council comes along afterwards and can just drive up the price of poker. That's not how it works. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. So as we have all these discussions between the administration and the council, and we're trying to arm wrestle and figure out what the right way to do the budget is, the administration prepares an amendment that goes on to the budget that usually adds these expenses. And remember, I told you before about by request. Here it is again. All this won't make sense when you look at the numbers, but here's the by request amendment to the budget that added all of these things that we talked about. Now look, I've spent all this time telling you practically how it works behind the scenes with me and the CAO and the administration about how we get to this point. I've talked to you about what the law says. So if you think that the council passed a bad budget, this is what you have to believe. One, that the council and the mayor colluded to put forward a budget that they knew didn't comply with the charter. Now, do you think we would do that? All right. Number two, that somebody acted in a lot of bad faith in putting this forward. I don't choose to believe that because I don't think that's how most people act. What I do choose to believe is option number three, which is everybody work together, talk to one another. We got an ordinance that was by request from the mayor about passing the budget. We have an amendment that's by request from the mayor about passing the budget. And all of those came together. And in fact, again, we worked together to make this happen. So then we passed the budget on November 21st. Now, here's the thing that's really important. If anybody didn't believe in the by request ordinance or the by request amendment, what could they have done? They could march down to council chambers and object. Here's what we saw, though. Nobody objected. Nobody objected. That tells me that we were all on the same page and we thought we had a good plan moving forward. Look, one of the reasons I wanted to be a budget chair is because you have to work with people in the city, you have to work with your colleagues, and you have to work with the administration. You can't fight about everything or else you're never going to pass a budget that works for the people of the city of New Orleans. I just want to let you know that's what goes into putting the budget together, and that it's important for all of us to be talking all the time and to assume and to believe that you're dealing in good faith, particularly with people you've been dealing with for years. So that brings me to part two. Part two involves what the council knew and when and why it did what it did. So I know it's really hard a lot of times when we're in the middle of things for everybody to remember certain meetings, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to point out to you a meeting that you can watch all of, or the snippets that we're going to include it here for you from February 11th this year. Now, what brought on the February 11th meeting was the mayor saying that we did not have a deal with the school board, and then also the administration saying there was a crisis when it came to the budget. All right, so what did the council do in response? Well, let's start with Councilmember Green, who makes a really good point here about looking at the personnel budget, why it's over, and how come we didn't have a discussion about this earlier.
Not know. I mean, what I'm saying is,
right,
how do we not know such a substantial amount? We just passed this budget 2 months ago. $42 million?
No. So this budget is for 2024, not 2025. This is 2025 actuals.
No,
So what
you-
we're listing here is because we saw what we saw in 2024, we're projecting for 25 that there's going to be overtime in unbudgeted positions of 50 million.
I know, but it's $40 million. We didn't just find out about that a month ago. We had to have known it sometime in 2024. That's my point.
So if Councilmember Green is raising this issue back in February, all it means is he's saying, I don't understand why we're talking about this in February when we just finished this long, laborious budget process that began in October, and how come we're learning about it right now? What he's also saying is, if there is a problem, then we need to figure it out right now so we don't have a disaster later in the year. That's responsible work, I would say, by the council member, and it's also not fighting about this. See, here's the thing. Come here. I get really tired of when people say the council fight about everything that happens. If you look and you watch what happens here, yes, we are definitely upset about the fact that the agreement with the school board is not being honored. But at the same time, we're also asking a lot of questions about what is happening with the budget and how and if we need to fix it right now. Okay, so then let's look at me asking questions about enforcement, and is there ways to raise additional revenue from the budget right now so we don't have a hole later in the year?
I mean, if we have all these expenses and revenue, then certain things we've discussed, I think, then have to become more elevated. So if we have $130 million that's owed by outstanding parking tickets, then to me it seems like we need to go after the worst 25 offenders and boot their cars.
Absolutely.
And do we need an ordinance to do that?
No, we have a plan. Absolutely.
Okay, well, is the plan going to be implemented before or after Mardi Gras?
April 1.
April 1, okay.
Okay, no magic there. Just really trying to figure out what makes the most sense. Now, one of the most interesting parts of the meeting is Councilmember Thomas. Councilmember Thomas, in his unique way, starts asking questions about whether or not the city is not going to be able to deliver on services because of the supposed crisis, and if we have to act right now. Look at all the questions he asks.
Are we saying if we do this, the trash may not be picked up?
No,
Are you saying if we do this, that playgrounds might be closed?
no,
Are you saying if we do this, that funding for the police department, which we now know is in excess of $40+ million over budget, that funding for them may be in jeopardy?
no,
Are you saying that we may potentially have to furlough or lay off city employees if you honor the original agreement?
no,
So none of those doomsday things are going to happen if we honor this agreement.
no, I don't believe so.
Now you'll notice one of the last thing he ends with is whether or not the city needs to furlough, and we were told no. Now here's Councilmember Mayoral, JP, talking about whether or not we need to have austerity. Here are JP's questions about whether or not we need to institute austerity right now.
If you believe that things are this dire, you think that our fiscal session could lead to significant downturns in revenue, then you don't start austerity after you're already in the hole. You start it before you get there so you have reserves. So if your position is right now that you believe that between federal spending and state spending, that we are going towards potentially a deficit, then this council has to reprioritize spending as a whole in the city of New Orleans. And
That's why we're having the general fund conversation.
Right, and so what I'm saying is that if that's your position, that we really believe these threats are out there that could significantly drop the revenue of the city and put us in a dire position, then we collectively have to change all of our spending behavior to reflect the fact that we are only going to spend money on priorities. And if that's mutually where we want to go, this council is willing to go there, but that's going to be austerity. And if that's what if the administration wants to go in with us on austerity, we can do that. But don't hoop and holler when, we're looking at a government that's looking at other outcomes.
Okay, so I've shown you 4 different council members. Councilmember Green, Councilmember Thomas, Councilmember Mayoral, Councilmember Geruso, all asking questions about what we need to do and are we in good shape. And the answer to all of our questions is give us a little bit more time. It's so early in the year, we're going to figure all of this out. Now, look, what happens over the next couple of months is we keep on asking questions. And what do? We basically say we're going to restrict a lot of the general fund spending, and we're not going to just put through every job that the administration is maybe asking for at this point because we don't want to strain the city's finances. All right, so then we get back to May and we start to see the administration's plan. And at this point, what have we kind of learned? We've learned, number one, that the budget gap that we saw in personnel has grown from about $40 million upward, and we later learned it's about $70 million. So now we have a problem because there's too much money that's being spent on personnel. And then we also know at this point, or close to that point, that the revenues aren't what they were projected to be, and we're about $30 million short. Now here's the thing. We're going to try and do our very best to work our way through this. And we're going to make sure that we're working hard. But this is something we have been asking about for a long time. And my commitment is to try to not fight about how we got here, because the evidence all shows what the process is, how it all works, and how we timely raised all these issues. What I hope you will join me on is how we fix all of this going forward.
Welcome back. I appreciate my good friend, Professor Joe Ignatius Geruso, breaking down kind of the tremendous misinformation that's been put out there on the council regarding the budget and really just laying out the facts. You guys know Joe very well. He's all about the facts, man. But I want to talk about something else before we end this video. I guess the question you have to ask is, why is Senator Duplessis so obsessed with blaming the council for the budget and really not doing what a typical candidate does, which is really promote themselves and their record? I've got an explanation for that. So on Senator Duplessis' website, he talks a lot about his 140 bills that he's passed. And I want to really kind of dig into that for a second. So first off, usually when legislators are trying to pad their record, they go and say, I have passed 140 instruments. They don't say bills, because bills has a very specific legal connotation. If you've ever seen Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law, that is how a bill becomes a law. Now, what's different is Senator Duplessis has actually only passed 42 bills, and he's passed 92 resolutions. Now, why is that important? So a bill, a la Schoolhouse Rocks, goes through a process where it's filed, referred to committee, passes a body, goes to another committee, passes a body, and becomes a law that's on the books for usually an infinite amount of time until it's changed. A resolution is very different. A resolution is like a commendation or a condolences, or like making it, World Walkathon Day. These are items that oftentimes do not go to committee, most times don't even go to both houses, if it's a congratulations or condolences, it just goes to one house, it's on the floor. And here's the important part. As a legislator, everyone votes in favor of resolutions. 99% of them pass. So the amount of work that's required to pass a resolution is pretty much no work at all. I mean, legislators regularly don't even pay attention when they're voting yes on resolutions. So when a person conflates a bill versus a resolution and they tell you they passed 40 bills, that would be akin, and I'm a terrible sports person, so I'm going to use two sports analogies and probably mess them up. It would be like a baseball player saying, I have hit 140 home runs. And yet when you look at their record, they hit 40, in this case, 42 home runs, and they bunted and walked 92 times. Now, as a baseball fan, you would be like, that's like a huge difference. Or I'll give you another analogy, football analogy. That would be like a quarterback saying, I threw 140 touchdowns, and come to find out they threw 42 touchdowns and they held the ball 92 times for the kicker to kick a field goal. See what I mean? Like, it's really an attempt to mislead a prospective voter about the effectiveness of a legislator. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't compare apples to apples. So let's think, what other legislators do we know that were in the Oh, wait, I was a legislator. That's right. Well, how many bills did I pass? Well, I passed 166 bills, and I passed 99 resolutions. Now, I would never run on my resolution record because those aren't real bills, and occasionally you'll have a resolution that like creates a task force that leads to bills, but the output for bills would match the resolutions if that were the case. Now, I want to talk about one bill in particular. On Senator Duplessis's website, link below, you will see his huge reference to non-unanimous juries. Now, why is that important? It's important because he talks about how he was a co-author and a huge proponent of the bill. Now, I want to give a brief, and it's going to be a smattering of really quick images, about the evolution of co-authors. So when a bill is filed, it has an author and sometimes a co-author. With non-unanimous juries, I was the author, and then Senator Troy Carter was the co-author. Two people, me as the author, Senator Carter backing me up as my co-author. As the bill passed the floor of the Senate, what happens, this is very important, when a bill passes, the members on the floor can open the bill to co-authors. So mind you, after the work is done, people can go, what a great bill, I would like to be a piece of that history. So you will see below, first, the original bill, second, the bill as it left the Senate with co-authors. Now, if you notice, no House members on there. When the bill got to the House and passed the floor of the House, they opened the bill up for co-authors. Hence, third image, the final version of the bill is the act with all of the co-authors. As you'll see, Senator Duplessis is in that number. Just because you're a co-author on a bill doesn't mean you actually did any work on it. It just means you were there to hit the machine when they opened it up for co-authors. But here's what I want to talk about non-unanimous juries in particular. That was a very, very difficult bill to pass, and it required a tremendous amount of work on my part with a lot of advocates having the right combination of people there to pass the bill. And to that end, when the bill actually was on the floor of the House, it was handled by the Republican head of the Criminal Justice Committee. And I want to play you how he started the debate on that.
I truly feel that this bill needs to be the definition of being united, because it's the right thing to do. I carry a lot of bills for the Attorney General. I carry a lot of bills for the District Attorney. And as someone who aspires to perhaps be the district attorney of their district, or perhaps one day the attorney general of the state, there are a lot of people surprised that I was willing to come down and carry this legislation. But the reason that I'm carrying it is because it's time that Louisiana caught up.
So, obviously, Sherman Mack, Republican head, criminal justice, handled the bill. But I walked the floor of the House, desk by desk, collecting all of the votes necessary to pass that bill. I remember distinctly the stories that I had, the conversations with individual, particularly Republican legislators to get their vote. In particular, Blake Miguez, the Ted Cruz of Louisiana, now senator, then a House member. He was very skeptical about supporting non-unanimous juries because the DAs and the sheriffs 100% against it. We had a lengthy conversation about why ending non-unanimous juries was important, because the tyranny of the majority could always lead to an opportunity where your constitutional rights could be compromised. And in our conversation, then Representative Miguez said, this is very important to me because if there ever is a time where there is an excessive overreach by liberals to take away our guns and laws are passed to take away our guns, then we would need the ability to have unanimous juries to protect ourselves. And I was like, whatever floats your boat. And that was part of the conversation that got his vote. So my point is, I know what I did working that floor with former colleagues to get that vote done. And what I will tell you is this. Senator Duplessis had nothing to do with any of that. My recollection of when I was working the floor to try and get this vote done was Senator Duplessis playing on his phone. I think in closing, really think about this. There's a reason why Senator Duplessis is running such a negative campaign, why he's attacking everyone. He attacks his opponents, he attacks Elena, he attacks Oliver, but more importantly, he attacks the entire council when none of us are running against him. And he's really made his campaign a referendum on the New Orleans City Council in defense of Mayor Cantrell. And that's unfortunate. I think what a qualified candidate who has a vision for the city of New Orleans should do is run on their record. Should run on the things they've actually done, not the things where they're around when it happened. As I said previously, why don't you focus on the job you're running for and not on the job you're not? Ladies and gentlemen, just in closing, once again, I do believe that based upon that 140 number, the mixing up of bills and resolutions, and as I explained, bills are done a very specific way, I want to give Senator Duplessis the benefit of the doubt, and maybe he just needs a little bit of remedial education as to how a bill becomes a law. And so that's what we're going to leave with this week. We're just going to remind Senator Duplessis the difference between a bill and a resolution by explaining where bills come from. Have a great week, New Orleans.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local...